Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Homecoming Shadows. The Iraqi sun had been unforgiving for 15 months, but nothing prepared Master Sergeant Wayne Abbott for the chill that greeted him at his own front door. The yellow ribbon magnet on his neighbor's car seemed to mock him as he stood on the porch of his suburban Sacramento home, duffel bag in hand, key trembling slightly as he inserted it into the lock. Wayne had built this life with precision. A two-story colonial with white shutters, a manicured lawn, and a swing set in the backyard where his 8-year-old son Tommy would play for hours. He'd married Donna Schultz 7 years ago, drawn to her vibrant laugh and the way she made him feel normal after his first tour in Afghanistan. She'd promised to keep their world intact while he served overseas, to be the anchor their family needed. The house felt wrong the moment he stepped inside. The familiar scent of Donna's vanilla candles was replaced by something else, cologne that wasn't his, takeout containers stacked carelessly on the coffee table, and an unsettling silence that made his combat-trained instincts prickle. The living room looked lived in, but not by his family. A leather jacket hung on the coat rack that he'd never seen before, and there were boot prints on his hardwood floors, size 11, maybe 12, definitely not Donna's. Donna? Tommy. His voice echoed through the empty rooms. Upstairs, he found their bedroom. The bed was unmade, sheets he didn't recognize tangled in a way that told a story he didn't want to read. On the nightstand sat a coffee mug with lipstick on the rim, not Donna's shade, and a charging cable for a phone that wasn't his wife's model. Wayne's military training had taught him to compartmentalize, to process information without emotion clouding judgment. But standing in his violated bedroom, the walls seemed to close in. 15 months of sand, heat, and constant danger, all while believing he was protecting something sacred. The photo of his wedding day mocked him from the dresser, Donna in white, him in his dress blues, both of them believing in forever. A neighbor's car door slammed outside, and Wayne moved to the window. Marie Rojas from next door was walking toward her house, a woman who'd always been kind to his family. On impulse, he headed downstairs and out the front door. "Marie," he called softly. She turned, her face brightening momentarily before concern crept in. "Wayne, you're back. We weren't expecting." She paused, studying his expression. "Are you okay? Where are Donna and Tommy?" Marie's discomfort was palpable. She glanced toward his house, then back at him. "Tommy's at the hospital, Wayne. There was an accident." The word accident hit him like shrapnel. "What hospital? What happened?" "Mercy General. He fell down the stairs yesterday." "Wayne, this is the second time in 3 months." Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. "I called Donna about the first incident, but she said boys will be boys, that Tommy was just being careless." Wayne's mind cataloged every detail, the defensive wound patterns he'd learned to recognize, the way Marie's eyes couldn't quite meet his, the careful language of someone who suspected but couldn't prove. 2 accidents in 3 months. Boys didn't just fall downstairs twice unless something was pushing them. "Where's Donna now?" She's been staying elsewhere lately. "With a friend," she said. "I have his number if you need it." Marie pulled out her phone with reluctance. "His name is Cliff Villanueva." The name meant nothing to Wayne, but the way Marie said it, with distaste and worry, told him everything he needed to know. His wife had found someone new, someone who had access to his son, someone who might be responsible for Tommy's accidents. "Text me that number," Wayne said, his voice steady despite the rage building in his chest. "And Marie, thank you for watching out for my boy." As he drove toward Mercy General, Wayne's hands gripped the steering wheel with enough force to leave impressions. The highway blurred past as his mind shifted into the tactical mode that had kept him alive in combat zones. Someone had hurt his son. Someone had violated his marriage, his home, his family. And someone was going to pay. But not yet. First, he needed intelligence. He needed to understand the full scope of the betrayal before he could plan his response. Wayne Abbott had spent 15 months fighting enemies overseas, never knowing that the real war was waiting for him at home. Chapter 2. Reconnaissance. The pediatric wing of Mercy General smelled like disinfectant and broken dreams. Wayne showed his military ID to the nurse at the desk, whose expression softened when she saw his deployment patch. These medical professionals had seen too many military families torn apart by distance and trauma. "Room 314, she said gently. "He's been asking for you." Wayne found Tommy sleeping, his small frame dwarfed by the hospital bed. The sight of his son's face made his jaw clench, purple bruising around his left eye, a split lip that was healing poorly, and his left arm in a cast that bore colorful signatures from well-meaning visitors. But it was the look of fear that crossed Tommy's face when he woke up and saw his father that broke something deep inside Wayne's chest. "Daddy." Tommy's voice was small, uncertain. "Hey, buddy." Wayne sat carefully on the edge of the bed, fighting to keep his voice steady. "I came as soon as I could." Tommy glanced toward the door nervously before speaking. "Are you going to stay this time?" The question cut deeper than any battlefield wound. "Yes, son. I'm home now. Can you tell me what happened to your arm?" Tommy's eyes filled with tears, and he looked away. "I fell down the stairs. I'm clumsy." The words came out practiced, rehearsed. Wayne recognized the pattern. A child repeating a story he'd been coached to tell. "Tommy, you can tell me anything. I promise you're safe now." "I can't," Tommy whispered. He said if I told anyone, he'd hurt Mommy too. Wayne's blood turned to ice. "Who said that, Tommy?" But Tommy had shut down, turning his face away from his father. A nurse knocked and entered, providing a merciful interruption to explain Tommy's injuries: a broken radius, bruised ribs, and a concussion from his most recent fall. The medical report painted a picture that made Wayne's Special Forces training in interrogation resistance pale in comparison to the rage he was suppressing. After the nurse left, Wayne pulled out his phone and called the number Marie had given him. A gravelly voice answered on the third ring. "Yeah, this is Wayne Abbott. I understand you know my wife." A pause. "Oh, the soldier boy. Donna said you weren't coming back for another month. Plans changed. Where is she?" "She's out. Shopping or something." "Look, man, maybe we should meet up, talk about this situation like adults." The casual arrogance in Cliff Villanueva's voice made Wayne's trigger finger itch. What situation would that be? "Come on, Abbott. You were gone for over a year. Donna's a beautiful woman with needs. I've been taking care of her, and your boy? Making sure they're safe. Taking care of them." Wayne stared at his son's bruised face and felt something cold and calculating settle into his mind. "Where should we meet?" "O'Malley's bar on Bradshaw Road. Hour and a half." "And Abbott? Don't bring any of your army buddies. This is between us." The line went dead. Wayne looked at Tommy, who had fallen back asleep, and made a silent promise. Justice was coming, but it would be thorough, complete, and utterly devastating. Leaving Tommy in the care of the nurses, Wayne drove to his old neighborhood to gather intelligence. His friend Victor Warren lived 3 blocks away, another Special Forces veteran who'd come home to find his own marriage in shambles. Victor answered the door with a beer in hand and a knowing look. "Heard you were back. Rough homecoming. How much do you know?" Victor gestured him inside. "Enough. Your wife's been flaunting her new boyfriend around town for 6 months. Cliff Villanueva, he's got a record. Assault charges, couple of DUIs, restraining order from his ex-wife. Real piece of work." "What kind of assault charges?" "Domestic violence. His ex-wife claimed he broke her wrist, but she dropped the charges. Witnesses said she was terrified of him." Victor's expression darkened. "Wayne, I've been watching your house when I could. That bastard's been living there like he owns it." Wayne absorbed this information with military precision. Cliff Villanueva wasn't just a homewrecker. He was a predator who'd found his way into Wayne's family and was using violence to maintain control. The bruises on Tommy's face weren't accidents. They were a systematic campaign of intimidation. "I need everything you can find on him. Employment history, addresses, contacts, weaknesses." Victor nodded. "Already on it. But Wayne, whatever you're thinking, be smart about it. This guy's dangerous, but he's also stupid. That's an advantage if you use it right." As Wayne left Victor's house, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Daddy, please come home soon. I'm scared." The message was from Tommy's phone, but Wayne knew his son was still in the hospital. Someone else had sent it, someone trying to manipulate him. Wayne smiled for the first time since coming home. Cliff Villanueva thought he was dealing with a broken soldier desperate to save his family. He had no idea he was about to face a predator far more dangerous than himself. Chapter 3. First Contact. O'Malley's bar sat in a strip mall between a pawn shop and a check-cashing place, its neon sign flickering intermittently like a dying heartbeat. Wayne arrived 30 minutes early, positioning himself at a corner table where he could observe the entrance while keeping his back to the wall. Old habits from too many hostile zones where the difference between vigilance and death was measured in milliseconds. He'd changed out of his military uniform into civilian clothes, jeans, boots, and a flannel shirt that concealed the knife clipped inside his waistband. Not that he expected to need it tonight. This was reconnaissance, not engagement. He needed to understand his enemy before choosing his battlefield. Cliff Villanueva walked in exactly on time. A man in his mid-30s with the kind of swaggering confidence that usually masked deep insecurity. He was bigger than Wayne had expected, maybe 6 feet 2 inches and solid, with hands that showed the calluses of manual labor. Prison tattoos decorated his forearms, and a gold chain caught the bar's dim lighting. He spotted Wayne immediately and approached with the measured gait of someone used to intimidating others. "Wayne Abbott," Cliff said, sliding into the opposite chair without invitation. "You look smaller than I expected." Wayne said nothing, studying his target. Cliff's pupils were slightly dilated. Cocaine, probably, and there was a tremor in his hands that suggested regular amphetamine use. His t-shirt was expensive but poorly fitted, jewelry flashy but not tasteful. Everything about him screamed insecurity compensated by aggression. Not much of a talker, Cliff signaled the bartender for a beer. That's probably why Donna got bored. Woman like that needs attention, conversation, a man who can satisfy her needs. His smile was meant to provoke. "Tell me about Tommy's accidents," Wayne said quietly. Cliff's expression shifted slightly. "Kids are clumsy. Especially boys. Sometimes they need to learn respect the hard way. 2 broken bones in 3 months seems excessive for clumsiness." "Listen, soldier boy," Cliff leaned forward. "I don't know what kind of stories the kid's been telling, but he's got an imagination. Falls downstairs, runs into doors, gets into fights at school. Some kids are just accident-prone." Wayne cataloged every word, every expression. Cliff was lying, but more importantly, he was enjoying it. This wasn't just abuse. It was sadistic pleasure in hurting a defenseless child. "Where's Donna tonight?" "Safe. Away from here. She doesn't need to see you threatening her new man." Cliff took a long drink of his beer. "Look, I get it. You come home, find your woman has moved on. Your kid likes me better than his old man. That's gotta hurt. But that's life, Abbott. You were gone, I was here. Simple as that. Tommy likes you better? Kid's crazy about me. Calls me dad sometimes." Cliff's grin was poison. "Of course, he's learning there are rules in my house. Children should be seen and not heard, you know? Sometimes they need reminders." Wayne's hand moved unconsciously toward his knife, but he forced himself to remain still. "Not yet. Not here. I want to see Donna." "Not happening. She doesn't want to see you. Made that pretty clear." Cliff pulled out his phone and scrolled through messages. "Matter of fact, she asked me to give you this." He slid the phone across the table. The message thread showed conversations between Cliff and Donna that made Wayne's stomach turn. But it was the photos that stopped his breathing. Intimate images of his wife with this man, taken in Wayne's own bedroom, in the house he'd paid for while defending his country overseas. "She's a wildcat," Cliff said, retrieving his phone. "Of course, you probably wouldn't know about that. Word is you're more of a missionary position kind of guy." Wayne stood slowly, his movement controlled and precise. "This conversation is over. Sit down, Abbott. We're not finished." Cliff's voice carried the edge of violence. "You think you can just come back and reclaim what's mine? Donna belongs to me now. The kid too. You had your chance, and you blew it by playing soldier. My son will never belong to you." Cliff laughed, a sound like broken glass. "Your son? Kid hasn't asked about you once since you left. But he sure learns quick when I explain how things work around here. Smart boy. Learns faster than his mother did." The admission hung in the air like a confession. Cliff had just revealed that he'd been systematically abusing both Donna and Tommy, training them through fear and violence to accept his dominance. Wayne felt the predatory calm that had served him in combat settle over his mind like a familiar coat. "You know what, Cliff? You're right about one thing." "What's that?" "I am different from you." Wayne dropped a 20 on the table. "I don't hurt people weaker than me to feel strong." "Yeah? What do you do?" Wayne met his eyes directly. "I eliminate threats to my family." He walked out of the bar without looking back, but he could feel Cliff's stare burning into his shoulders. In the parking lot, he sat in his truck for several minutes, forcing his breathing to steady. The encounter had given him exactly what he needed. Confirmation that Cliff Villanueva was a sadistic predator who had terrorized his family, and more importantly, the knowledge that this man was arrogant enough to believe himself untouchable. Wayne pulled out his phone and called Victor. I need that intel package tonight. And Victor? Start researching abandoned properties in Sacramento County. Remote locations. How remote? Remote enough that no one will hear screaming. Wayne hung up and started his engine. The game had begun, and Cliff Villanueva had no idea he'd just declared war on the wrong soldier. Chapter 4. Psychological Warfare. Wayne spent the next morning at the hospital with Tommy, watching his son flinch every time the door opened and seeing the way he unconsciously protected his injured arm. The boy's fear was so profound it seemed to radiate from his small body like heat from a fever. During the quiet moments between medical checks, Wayne began the delicate process of earning back his son's trust. Tommy, I want you to know something important, Wayne said, keeping his voice gentle. No one, and I mean no one, has the right to hurt you. Not ever. Tommy's eyes remained fixed on his lap. Cliff says kids need discipline. That I'm too soft because you weren't here to make me tough. Look at me, son. Wayne waited until Tommy's fearful eyes met his. I've been to war. I've seen tough men and weak men. You know what makes someone truly tough? Protecting people who can't protect themselves. Not hurting them. A spark of something. Hope. Maybe. Flickered in Tommy's expression. Cliff says you left us because you didn't love us anymore. That's a lie. I left to serve my country, but I never stopped loving you or your mother. Not for 1 second. Wayne pulled out his wallet and showed Tommy a photo he'd carried through every mission, his son's school picture from the year before. I looked at this every single day and promised myself I'd come home to you. While Tommy dozed, Wayne stepped into the hallway to coordinate with Victor. His friend had been busy overnight, compiling a comprehensive intelligence package on Cliff Villanueva that painted a picture of escalating violence and predatory behavior. This bastard's been working construction jobs around the city, Victor explained over the phone. Bounces from crew to crew because he can't keep his temper in check. Currently working demolition for Pemberton Construction. But here's the interesting part. His ex-wife, Carrie Schultz, lives in Roseville. Different Schultz family, no relation to your wife. What's her story? Hospital records show 3 visits, 4 accidents during their marriage. Broken wrist, bruised ribs, concussion. Same pattern as what he's doing to Tommy. She finally got away 6 months ago, but she's scared to testify against him. Wayne filed this information carefully. What about property records? His mother owns a cabin up in Forest Hill, about 40 minutes outside the city. Remote location, nearest neighbor is 2 miles away. She died last year, left it to him, but he never updated the deed. Perfect spot for someone who wants privacy. Send me the address. Wayne's next call was to his lawyer, Abraham Bird, a veteran himself who specialized in military divorce cases. Abe had seen too many soldiers come home to betrayal and broken promises. Wayne, I heard through the grapevine you were back. How bad is it? Infidelity, child abuse, and I have evidence of both. I want full custody of Tommy and everything else she can't prove she brought to the marriage. That's aggressive. You sure you want to go scorched earth? Abe, someone's been systematically abusing my 8-year-old son for months. There is no middle ground here. The lawyer's tone shifted to pure business. I'll need medical records, police reports if any were filed, and documentation of the infidelity. Can you get that? Wayne smiled grimly. Consider it done. His next stop was a surveillance electronics store where he purchased several items that would help him gather the evidence he needed. The clerk, a young veteran named Eddie Watkins, recognized the look in Wayne's eyes and offered professional advice on the best equipment for home security purposes. That evening, Wayne implemented the first phase of his psychological campaign. He parked across the street from his house, the house he still legally owned, and watched as Cliff and Donna arrived home together. They moved with the casual intimacy of an established couple, Cliff's hand possessive on Donna's lower back as they walked to the front door. Wayne waited until they were inside, then approached quietly. The expensive surveillance equipment he'd purchased allowed him to hear their conversation clearly. He looked different, Donna was saying. Harder somehow. It scared me. Guy's probably got PTSD or some shit. Cliff's voice carried his usual arrogance. These military types come back all messed up. Heard he's been asking questions about Tommy too. What kind of questions? The kind that could cause problems. Maybe it's time to have another conversation with the kid about keeping his mouth shut. Wayne's jaw tightened as he heard Cliff's implied threat. But this conversation was exactly what he needed. proof that Cliff was intimidating Tommy into silence about the abuse. Around midnight, Wayne began phase 2. He knew from his surveillance that Cliff was a heavy sleeper, especially after drinking. Using skills learned in special operations, Wayne entered his own house silently through the back door he'd never changed the locks on. Moving like a ghost through his violated home, Wayne began leaving subtle signs of his presence. He rearranged items just enough to be noticeable to someone looking for them. A picture frame turned slightly, books repositioned on shelves, the coffee maker moved 3 inches to the left. Nothing overtly threatening, just enough to plant seeds of paranoia in Cliff's mind. In the bedroom where his wife slept next to her lover, Wayne left the most pointed message. On Donna's nightstand, he placed a single photo, their wedding picture, with a yellow ribbon tied around the frame. Next to it, he left a handwritten note. Some promises are meant to be kept. Others demand consequences. Wayne was gone before either of them stirred, but he knew the psychological impact would be immediate and profound. Cliff Villanueva had spent months using fear and intimidation to control Wayne's family. Now it was time for him to experience what real fear felt like. From his truck parked down the street, Wayne watched the lights come on in his house 20 minutes later. Through the surveillance equipment, he heard Donna's panicked voice calling Cliff's name. The hunt had begun, and the predator was about to become the prey. Chapter 5: The Web Titans. The next morning brought chaos to Wayne's house as police cruisers lined the street in response to Donna's frantic 911 call about a break-in. Wayne observed from a coffee shop 3 blocks away, watching through binoculars as officers investigated what they would ultimately classify as a non-criminal domestic dispute. Technically, Wayne still owned the house and had every legal right to enter it. Detective Alan Schneider, a grizzled veteran of Sacramento PD's domestic violence unit, questioned Donna and Cliff separately. Wayne could read the detective's body language from his distant vantage point. Skepticism about Cliff's story, concern about the obvious signs of recent violence in the home, and professional interest in the medical records Wayne had anonymously mailed to the police station the previous evening. Victor called with an update while Wayne watched the police work. Carrie Schultz agreed to meet with you. She's terrified, but she wants Cliff stopped before he kills someone. Turns out he threatened her sister's kids too. Where and when? Noon at the Starbucks on Douglas Boulevard. She'll be wearing a red scarf. Wayne, be gentle with her. This woman's been through hell. Carrie Schultz was smaller than Wayne had expected, with the kind of nervous energy that came from months of looking over her shoulder. Her hands shook slightly as she stirred sugar into her coffee, and faint scars on her wrists told their own story. But her eyes held steel, a survivor's determination that Wayne recognized from his own mirror. "You're Tommy's father," she said without preamble. "I saw the news coverage when you deployed. Cliff showed me the articles, said you were probably going to get yourself killed over there." He was wrong. Carrie studied his face with the careful assessment of someone who'd learned to read dangerous men. "Maybe. He's scared of you, though. Called me last night, rambling about how you were stalking him. First time I've heard fear in his voice since I've known him. Tell me about what he did to you." The story that emerged was a textbook case of escalating domestic violence. Cliff had started with emotional manipulation, isolating Carrie from friends and family. Then came the accidental bruises, always in places that could be hidden by clothing. Finally, the systematic beatings that sent her to emergency rooms 3 times before she found the courage to escape. "He has this way of making you believe it's your fault," Carrie explained. "That you deserved it somehow. And he's smart about it. Never leaves marks that can't be explained, always has an excuse ready." "How did you finally get away?" "My sister threatened to call the police whether I wanted her to or not." Cliff had started making comments about her kids, saying they needed discipline too. "That's when I knew he wouldn't stop with me." Wayne felt pieces clicking into place. He escalates. Gets bored with one victim, needs new targets. "Exactly. When I left, I knew he'd find someone else. I just hoped." She trailed off, guilt evident in her expression. "I should have warned your wife somehow. This isn't your fault, but I need your help to stop him." Carrie's laugh was bitter. "I tried testifying once. He had his lawyer paint me as an unstable ex-wife with a grudge. No conviction, and he made my life hell for months afterward. This time will be different. I have evidence he's been abusing my son, documentation of his pattern of behavior, and resources he doesn't know about." Wayne leaned forward. "Are you willing to try again if I can guarantee your safety?" Something shifted in Carrie's expression, hope mixed with desperate determination. What kind of guarantee? The kind that ensures Cliff Villanueva will never hurt anyone again. That afternoon, Wayne implemented the next phase of his campaign. Using information Carrie had provided about Cliff's drug connections, Wayne visited several of the construction sites where Cliff had worked. The story he told was simple. He was a concerned father worried about the men his son was exposed to, just asking questions about character references. The responses painted a consistent picture. Cliff was known for his temper, his drug use, and his tendency to brag about keeping women in line. One foreman, Gene Driscoll, pulled Wayne aside privately. "Look, I don't usually talk about former employees, but that guy made everyone uncomfortable." Showed pictures of some woman's bruises on his phone, like trophies or something. Said he was training her properly. Wayne's blood turned to ice. Training her? His words, not mine. Also bragged about having to discipline some kid who didn't show him proper respect. Made jokes about kids learning lessons the hard way. Gene's expression was disgusted. "We let him go after 2 weeks. Couldn't risk having someone like that around families." Armed with this information, Wayne made his next move. He called the Sacramento County Child Protective Services office and filed a formal complaint against Cliff Villanueva, providing detailed medical records, witness statements, and a recording of Cliff's admission at the bar about teaching Tommy lessons. The social worker, Melinda Pope, listened with growing concern. "Mr. Abbott, these are serious allegations. We'll need to interview your son immediately. He's still in the hospital. And ma'am, he's terrified. This man has threatened him into silence. We're trained to handle traumatized children. But I need you to understand, if we determine there's ongoing abuse, we may need to place Tommy in protective custody until the threat is eliminated." Wayne's jaw tightened. Whatever it takes to keep him safe. As evening approached, Wayne parked near the cabin in Forest Hill that Victor had identified. The property was perfect for his purposes, isolated, defensible, and far enough from civilization that privacy was guaranteed. More importantly, the deed records showed it was still in Cliff's mother's name, meaning Cliff had no legal standing to be there. Wayne's phone buzzed with a message from Donna. "We need to talk. Meet me at Tommy's hospital room tomorrow at 2 p.m. Come alone." He smiled grimly. His psychological pressure was working. Donna was starting to crack, realizing that her new life with Cliff wasn't the fairy tale she'd imagined. But Wayne had no intention of meeting her on her terms. This game would be played by his rules, on his timeline, with consequences she couldn't yet imagine. The web was tightening around Cliff Villanueva, and soon he would discover that predators could become prey with terrifying speed. Chapter 6. Pressure Points. Donna Abbott stood by Tommy's hospital bed at exactly 2 p.m., but Wayne wasn't there. Instead, she faced Detective Schneider and social worker Melinda Pope, both armed with questions she couldn't answer and evidence she couldn't explain. Wayne watched from the hallway security camera feed on his phone, having hacked the hospital's system the night before. "Mrs. Abbott," Detective Schneider began, "we need to discuss your son's injuries and your relationship with Cliff Villanueva." Donna's face went pale. "I don't understand. I thought this was about Wayne threatening us." "No, ma'am. This is about child endangerment and possible domestic violence." Melinda Pope opened her file. Tommy's medical records show a pattern of injuries consistent with systematic abuse. Broken bones, bruises, signs of repeated trauma. Wayne could see Donna's hands shaking through the camera feed. She glanced toward Tommy, who was awake and listening to every word with wide, frightened eyes. "Tommy's accident-prone. He falls a lot, runs into things. Boys his age." "Mrs. Abbott," the detective interrupted, "we have witness statements and recordings that suggest otherwise, including admissions from Mr. Villanueva himself about disciplining your son." The color drained from Donna's face completely. She finally understood that Wayne hadn't been making empty threats. He'd been building a case with military precision. While the interrogation continued, Wayne was across town implementing another pressure point. He'd arranged to meet Alfonso McElroy, Cliff's current employer at Pemberton Construction. The site foreman was a no-nonsense man who'd served 2 tours in Iraq and recognized a fellow veteran immediately. "Heard you were asking about Villanueva," Alfonso said, gesturing Wayne into his trailer office. "Truth is, we've been looking for reasons to cut him loose. Guy's a liability." Wayne showed him photos of Tommy's injuries. "He did this to my 8-year-old son. Alfonso's expression darkened. Jesus Christ. What do you need from me? Documentation of his drug use, his violent behavior, anything that establishes a pattern. Done. I've got 3 incident reports filed with HR about his temper, plus failed drug tests he somehow talked his way out of. Alfonso pulled files from his desk. He threatened a co-worker last week, said he'd teach him respect the same way he taught his girlfriend's kid. Wayne felt another piece of evidence slot into place. I'll need copies of everything. Consider it done. And Abbott? That bastard scheduled to work the late shift tonight at the demolition site on J Street. Just in case you wanted to know where to find him. As Wayne left the construction office, his phone rang. Victor's voice was tight with urgency. We've got movement. Cliff just pulled up to your house, loaded 2 suitcases into his truck, and took off. GPS tracker I planted shows he's heading toward the freeway. He's running. Gets better. 20 minutes ago, someone matching his description cleaned out a Bank of America account registered to Donna Abbott. Withdrew $8,000 in cash. Wayne smiled coldly. Cliff was reacting exactly as predicted. When pressure mounted, predators typically fled rather than fight. But Wayne had anticipated this response and prepared accordingly. Track him to whatever hotel he holes up in, then back off. I want him to think he's safe for a few hours. Wayne's next stop was the hospital, where the interrogation had ended with Donna in tears and Tommy finally beginning to speak. Melinda Pope emerged from the room looking grim. That child has been systematically terrorized, she told Wayne. He's afraid to sleep, afraid to eat, afraid to speak above a whisper. The psychological damage is severe. What about Donna? Claims she didn't know the extent of the abuse, but her story has holes. She's been covering for Villanueva, making excuses for Tommy's injuries. The social worker's expression hardened. Frankly, Mr. Abbott, she failed to protect her child. That's going to factor into any custody decisions. Wayne entered Tommy's room to find his son sitting up in bed, looking more alert than he had since Wayne's return. Donna sat in a corner chair, her face streaked with tears and her hands clenched in her lap. Daddy, Tommy said, his voice stronger than before. I told them about Cliff. About what he really did. You were very brave, son. I'm proud of you. Donna looked up with desperate eyes. Wayne, I know this looks bad, but I was scared too. You don't understand what he's like when he's angry. I understand perfectly. I understand that while I was dodging IEDs in Iraq, you brought a predator into our home and let him terrorize our son for months. He said he loved me, that he wanted to be a father to Tommy. I thought. You thought about yourself. Wayne cut her off. You thought about your loneliness, your needs, your wants. You never thought about what this would do to Tommy. Donna's tears came harder. I made a mistake. Can't we fix this? Can't we be a family again? Wayne stared at the woman he'd once loved, seeing clearly for the first time how selfish she'd always been, how quick to rationalize choices that served her desires. No, Donna, we can't. The finality in his voice seemed to break something inside her. What are you going to do? Wayne kissed Tommy's forehead gently. I'm going to make sure no one ever hurts you again, buddy. And I'm going to make sure the man who did hurt you pays for every bruise, every broken bone, every nightmare. He looked at Donna one last time. As for you, you'll be hearing from my lawyer. Full custody, the house, everything. You chose Cliff over our son. Now you can live with the consequences. Wayne left the hospital with a clear conscience and a dark purpose. Tommy was safe. Donna was facing the ruins of her choices, and Cliff Villanueva was about to discover that running from Wayne Abbott was like trying to outrun a guided missile. The final phase of his plan was about to begin. Chapter 7. The hunt begins. Cliff Villanueva's truck sat in the parking lot of a seedy motel off Highway 80, 40 miles east of Sacramento. The Sleepy Inn was the kind of place that rented rooms by the hour and asked no questions about bloodstains or screaming. Wayne had followed the GPS tracker to this location and spent 2 hours conducting surveillance from across the street. Room 247. Second floor, corner unit with only one exit unless Cliff wanted to risk a 20-foot drop onto concrete. Wayne could see the glow of a television through the thin curtains and the shadow of a man pacing back and forth like a caged animal. At midnight, Wayne made his move. The motel's security cameras were ancient and easily disabled. The night clerk was asleep behind bulletproof glass, and the other guests were either unconscious or wished they were. Wayne climbed the external stairs with ghost-like silence. decades of special operations training reducing him to a shadow with purpose. He listened at the door first. Inside, Cliff was on the phone, his voice slurred with alcohol and agitation. "Don't give a shit what the cops said. That bastard set me up somehow. Yeah, I know it looks bad, but the kid's lying. They're all lying." Wayne smiled grimly. Even now, faced with the consequences of his actions, Cliff couldn't accept responsibility. He picked the lock in 30 seconds, a skill learned in places where entry and exit meant the difference between mission success and body bags. The door opened silently. Cliff sat on the edge of the bed with his back to the entrance, a bottle of whiskey in one hand and his phone in the other. He was exactly where Wayne's psychological pressure had driven him, isolated, paranoid, and making mistakes. "Hello, Cliff." Cliff spun around, nearly dropping the bottle. His face went white when he saw Wayne standing in the doorway, the overhead light creating a menacing silhouette. "What the fuck? How did you find me?" Wayne stepped inside and closed the door, turning the deadbolt with deliberate precision. "I'm Special Forces, Cliff. Finding people is what I do." Cliff scrambled backward on the bed, reaching for something under the pillow. Wayne was faster, crossing the room in 2 strides and pinning Cliff's arm before he could draw whatever weapon he'd hidden. "Looking for this?" Wayne held up a .38 revolver, checking the cylinder. "Stolen, serial number filed off. Another felony to add to your list. Listen, man, we can work this out. Donna and we're over. I'll disappear, never bother your family again." Wayne sat in the room's only chair, placing the gun on the nightstand beside him. "You're going to disappear, that's true. But first, we're going to have a conversation about Tommy." Cliff's bravado crumbled as he realized the full extent of his situation. He was trapped in a remote location with a man who had every reason to want him dead, and no one knew where he was. "Look, the kid's fine. A few bumps and bruises never killed anyone. My old man used to knock me around, and it made me tough." "Is that your justification? Your father was abusive, so you think it's normal to terrorize an 8-year-old. I was teaching him respect. Kid had no discipline, no boundaries. Someone had to." Wayne's movement was so fast Cliff didn't see it coming. One moment he was sitting across the room. The next his hand was around Cliff's throat, lifting him partially off the bed. "You broke his arm. Twice." Cliff clawed at Wayne's grip, his face turning red. "Accident, he fell. You gave him nightmares so severe, he wets the bed. You made him afraid to speak above a whisper." Wayne's voice was deadly calm. "You turned my son into a terrified shadow of himself." Wayne released his grip, letting Cliff fall back onto the bed gasping. "But the worst part isn't what you did to Tommy. It's that you enjoyed it." Cliff rubbed his throat, trying to regain his composure. "You can't prove any of that. It's his word against mine." Wayne pulled out his phone and played a recording. Cliff's own voice from the bar 3 nights earlier, bragging about teaching Tommy lessons and admitting to hitting him. Cliff's face went ashen as he heard his own words condemning him. "I've got recordings, witnesses, medical evidence, and testimony from your ex-wife about your pattern of abuse. The police are already building a case." Wayne leaned forward. "But here's what you don't understand, Cliff. I don't need the legal system to get justice." "You're threatening me?" "I'm explaining your situation. You have 2 choices. Choice 1. You can cooperate with the investigation, plead guilty to all charges, and spend the next 15 years in state prison where child abusers are treated exactly as they deserve." Cliff's eyes darted toward the door, calculating distances. "What's choice 2? Wayne's smile was predatory. "Choice 2 is more immediate." The sound of approaching sirens made both men freeze. Red and blue lights flashed through the window as police cars surrounded the motel. Wayne checked his watch, exactly on schedule. "You called the cops?" Cliff asked incredulously. "I called Detective Schneider 20 minutes ago and told him where to find you, along with the $8,000 you stole from my wife's account and the stolen gun you're carrying." Cliff lunged for the window, but Wayne was already moving. A precise strike to Cliff's solar plexus dropped him to his knees, gasping for air. "The hunt's over, Cliff. You're done running." As police pounded on the door, Wayne stood and adjusted his jacket. Cliff Villanueva would be arrested tonight on multiple felony charges. The legal system would have its turn at him. But Wayne's plan was far from complete. Justice was just beginning. Chapter 8, Legal Warfare. The Sacramento County Courthouse buzzed with activity as reporters and curious onlookers gathered for what had become the most talked-about child abuse case in years. Wayne sat in the front row of the gallery, his military bearing and calm demeanor a stark contrast to the chaos surrounding him. Behind him, Carrie Schultz had also come to watch the man who'd terrorized her finally face consequences. Cliff Villanueva entered the courtroom in Orange County jail scrubs, his swagger replaced by the shuffling gait of someone who discovered that jailhouse justice had its own harsh lessons for child abusers. The black eye and split lip he sported weren't from resisting arrest. District Attorney Rebecca Compton approached the bench with the confidence of someone holding unbeatable cards. Wayne had spent the previous month working with her office, providing evidence so comprehensive that Cliff's defense attorney had already attempted to negotiate a plea deal 3 times. Your Honor, DA Compton began. The defendant stands accused of systematic child abuse, domestic violence, theft, and possession of stolen firearms. The evidence will show a pattern of escalating violence against vulnerable victims. Cliff's public defender, Wade Burton, looked like a man trying to bail out the Titanic with a coffee cup. The evidence against his client was overwhelming. Medical records, recorded admissions, witness testimony, and now Carrie Schultz's formal statement detailing nearly identical abuse patterns. Tommy took the stand on the second day of trial, his small voice steady despite the presence of the man who terrorized him for months. Wayne had worked with child psychologists to prepare his son for this moment, but seeing Tommy's courage still filled him with fierce pride. He said if I told anyone, he'd hurt Mommy. Tommy testified, his eyes fixed on the prosecutor rather than Cliff. He said soldiers like Daddy never come home, so I had to listen to him now. The jury's reaction was visceral. Several members looked openly hostile toward Cliff, who sat slumped in his chair as his lies unraveled in real time. Carrie Schultz's testimony sealed Cliff's fate. She described the same methods of intimidation, the same escalating violence, the same threats against family members that had characterized his relationship with Tommy and Donna. He told me his job was to break me down and build me back up the way he wanted, Carrie said, her voice growing stronger with each word. When I finally escaped, he threatened my sister's children, said he'd teach them the same lessons he taught me. Wayne watched Cliff's face throughout the trial, seeing the exact moment the predator realized he'd become prey. Gone was the arrogant swagger, replaced by the desperate look of someone facing the consequences of their choices. On the third day, DA Compton played the recordings Wayne had gathered, Cliff bragging about disciplining Tommy, admitting to the abuse, and making threats. The jury listened in stunned silence as Cliff's own words condemned him. The defense's strategy crumbled completely when they called Donna to testify. Wayne's soon-to-be ex-wife took the stand looking haggard and broken, the reality of her choices finally crushing her spirit. Did you know Mr. Villanueva was abusing your son? Wade Burton asked, hoping to shift blame. Donna's answer destroyed any remaining sympathy for her. I knew Tommy was getting hurt, but Cliff said boys needed to be tough. I thought. She broke down, unable to finish. You thought what, Mrs. Abbott? I thought if I just kept Cliff happy, he'd stop. But he kept getting worse. Wayne felt no satisfaction watching his former wife's breakdown. She had failed their son in the most fundamental way possible, but seeing her destroyed served no purpose. His focus remained on ensuring Cliff faced full consequences. The prosecution's final witness was Gene Driscoll, the construction foreman who testified about Cliff's workplace behavior and his bragging about abusing women and children. The cumulative effect of the testimony painted a picture of a serial predator who targeted vulnerable families. Cliff's defense lasted less than 2 hours. His attorney's argument that Wayne had somehow orchestrated an elaborate frame-up fell flat when confronted with months of documented evidence and multiple independent witnesses. The jury deliberated for 47 minutes. Guilty on all counts. Judge Terrence Schaefer showed no mercy during sentencing. Mr. Villanueva, you systematically terrorized a child and betrayed the trust of a military family serving our country. The court sentences you to 25 years in state prison with no possibility of parole for 15 years. Cliff's legs gave out as the reality hit him. 25 years meant he'd be in his 60s when released, assuming he survived that long in a system notoriously harsh on child abusers. As court officers led Cliff away, he looked back at Wayne with eyes full of hatred and desperation. This isn't over, Abbott. I'll get out someday. Wayne's expression never changed. No, Cliff. It won't. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded Wayne, But he had only one statement. Justice was served today. My son can finally sleep without nightmares. But Wayne knew the legal system was only one front in his war. Cliff Villanueva would spend decades in prison, but that wasn't enough. True justice required something more permanent, more final. And Wayne Abbott was just getting started. Chapter 9, Final Justice. 2 years had passed since Cliff Villanueva's conviction, and life had settled into a new rhythm for Wayne and Tommy. The boy had blossomed in the absence of fear, his natural intelligence and humor returning as he healed from his trauma. They'd moved to a new house across town, a fresh start unmarked by painful memories. Donna had fallen apart completely after the trial. The divorce had left her with nothing, her friends had abandoned her, and the guilt of what she'd allowed to happen to Tommy had driven her to alcoholism and depression. She'd attempted suicide twice, each time calling Wayne from the hospital to beg forgiveness that would never come. Wayne felt no satisfaction in her destruction. She was Tommy's mother, despite her failures, and her complete breakdown served no purpose beyond her own self-inflicted punishment. He'd ensured she received mental health treatment, but maintained strict boundaries, supervised visits with Tommy only, no overnight stays, no romantic reconciliation fantasies. The call came on a rainy Thursday evening in November. Victor's voice was tense with urgency. Wayne, we've got a problem. Cliff's been transferred to minimum security. Good behavior, model prisoner status. Word is he's working on an appeal. Wayne felt ice settle in his veins. What kind of appeal? Claims his confession was coerced, that you used illegal surveillance methods. His new lawyer thinks they can get the conviction overturned on technicalities. Wayne stared out the window at Tommy playing in their backyard, finally free and happy after 2 years of healing. The thought of Cliff Villanueva walking free, potentially seeking revenge against the family that had destroyed his life, was unacceptable. How long before the appeal is heard? 6 months, maybe less. And Wayne, there's more. Prison intelligence says he's been making threats, specifically about you and Tommy. That night, Wayne sat in his study surrounded by maps, legal documents, and intelligence reports. He'd known this moment might come. The legal system had weaknesses, technicalities that allowed predators to escape justice through procedural loopholes rather than actual innocence. Wayne had spent 20 years in special operations, where justice was simpler and more direct. Some threats couldn't be contained by courtrooms and prison walls. Some predators required permanent solutions. The plan Wayne developed was elegant in its simplicity. Cliff's minimum security facility had work release programs that allowed inmates to perform manual labor outside prison walls. Wayne had connections throughout the construction industry who could ensure Cliff was assigned to specific work sites on specific days. Industrial accidents were unfortunately common in demolition work. Heavy machinery, unstable structures, and dangerous chemicals created an environment where even experienced workers sometimes made fatal mistakes. Wayne spent 3 weeks conducting reconnaissance on the construction sites where Cliff would be working. He identified the perfect location, a condemned office building scheduled for controlled demolition, where Cliff's work crew would be removing asbestos on the upper floors. The day of reckoning arrived with unseasonable warmth for late November. Cliff and 5 other inmates were transported to the demolition site under minimal guard supervision. Minimum security prisoners were considered low-flight risks and generally trustworthy. Wayne watched from a neighboring rooftop as Cliff's crew began their work on the 7th floor. The building's structural integrity had been compromised by previous demolition work, and the weight-bearing supports were already stressed beyond safety margins. Cliff looked older than his years, prison life having carved deep lines into his face and robbed his movements of their former swagger. But when he thought no one was watching, Wayne could see the familiar predatory calculation in his eyes. He was planning something. Wayne had prepared for multiple contingencies, but Cliff's own arrogance provided the perfect opportunity. Breaking from his work crew to explore the building alone was a violation of safety protocols that the guards would later blame for the accident. Wayne moved through the building like a ghost, using structural knowledge gained from his reconnaissance to remain undetected. He found Cliff on the 8th floor, examining a section of wall that looked different from the rest. Looking for something, Cliff? Cliff spun around, his face going white with shock and terror. What the hell are you doing here? Making sure justice is permanent. Wayne stepped forward, noting that Cliff's prison workouts had added muscle but couldn't hide the institutional pallor and nervous tics that marked him as prey rather than predator now. "You can't touch me. I'm a state prisoner. There are guards downstairs. The guards think you're working with your crew. Your crew thinks you wandered off to smoke. No one's looking for you." Cliff backed toward the window, his eyes darting frantically for escape routes. "Look, man, I know you hate me. I get it. But killing me won't change what happened. You're right. It won't change what you did to Tommy." Wayne's voice was coldly conversational. "But it will ensure you never hurt another child. I'm getting out anyway. My appeal's going to work, and when I'm free, when you're free, you'll hunt down my family for revenge. You'll find another vulnerable woman, another defenseless child. The cycle will continue until someone stops it permanently." Wayne pulled a small device from his pocket, a radio-controlled detonator connected to explosive charges he'd placed on the building's remaining support structures. Not enough to bring down the entire floor, just enough to create a localized collapse that would look like structural failure. Cliff's eyes widened as he recognized what Wayne was holding. "You're going to blow up the building?" "Just this section. You're standing directly over a load-bearing support that's already compromised. When it fails, this floor will collapse down to the 6th level. Very tragic industrial accident. You're insane. They'll investigate. They'll know. They'll find that a convicted child abuser ignored safety protocols and died in an unfortunate but predictable accident. No one will look too hard at eliminating a predator." Cliff lunged for the detonator, but Wayne had anticipated the move. A precise strike to Cliff's solar plexus dropped him to his knees, gasping for air. "Tell me, Cliff, in your worst nightmares about prison, did you ever imagine it would end like this?" Cliff looked up with desperate eyes. "Please. I have a sister. She has kids. If something happens to me, your sister's children will be safer with you dead. Every child will be safer." Wayne pressed the detonator button. The explosion was smaller than it sounded, a controlled demolition that collapsed one section of floor exactly as designed. When the dust settled, Cliff Villanueva was gone, buried under tons of concrete and steel in what would be ruled in tragic industrial accident. Wayne left the building through the same route he'd used to enter, his presence erased from security cameras and witness statements. By the time emergency responders arrived, he was 20 miles away, picking up Tommy from school for their weekly father-son dinner. That evening, as Tommy told him about his day over pizza, Wayne felt a profound sense of completion. The monster who had terrorized his son was gone forever. Justice had been served not by judges and juries, but by a father's unbreakable determination to protect his child. Wayne Abbott had learned many things during his military service, but the most important lesson was this: some threats can only be eliminated through decisive action. Some predators can only be stopped permanently. Tommy was safe. That was all that mattered. The cycle of violence had ended, and Wayne would never apologize for the methods required to achieve that peace.